it's like when I see my work on a billboard, it's almost like an out of body experience. Like I know that I did it, but like I don't, it's like, it's almost like somebody else did it. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of how I see some of this work. Like I did do this, but like, I just don't think about it enough to like, for it to really, really be there every day, you know? And maybe that's just me, but yeah, it's venues like this where I'm like, and I get to tell the stories. Like, I'm just appreciative. Like, okay, cool. Like maybe that gives me a little bit more confidence going into the next shoot, you know?
Yo, we're back with another episode of the Black Shutter Podcast. My name is Idris Talib Solomon, and I'm your host. And today, I got the homie with us, Kareem Black, portrait photographer based in New York. So, you know, Kareem, the reason why I brought you onto this show is because it's his 50th year hip hop, right? Hip hop just turned 50. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, hip-hop.
I grew up on the culture. I know you grew up on the culture. And I saw that you put a post up a few weeks ago, just basically saying happy birthday to hip hop. And you included a bunch of photos that you took throughout the course of your career, which we're going to talk about. But I thought it'd be dope, you know, to get you on the show and just hear from your mouth, like some of the stories behind some of these images you made. But for folks who may not be familiar with who you are, why don't you just, you know, take this time to give a brief introduction of who Kareem Black is as a photographer.
Hey, Idris, thank you very much for having me on again. I really appreciate it. My name's Kareem Black. I'm a professional photographer out of New York. I've been shooting for 23 years professionally. I shoot a lot of advertising, a lot of celebrity. I definitely think in the early days I was shooting a lot more music, a lot more hip hop. CD covers was a big thing for me back in the day. For record labels that a lot of whom don't exist anymore, but as a person who appreciates hip hop, grew up on it, a lot of my dreams came true by shooting some of these artists that I really admired and who had influenced me in life and helped me just sort of grow and know the world. So, but yeah, that's who I am, and that's a little bit about my relationship with hip hop and hip hop photography.
All right. So I know that you are looking at your work. You are, it looks like primarily a portrait photographer.
Yes, sir.
Right. So that means that, you know, you do a lot of entertainment. I know you photographed a bunch of actors. You know, you've done like key art for shows on MTV and everything. But what sort of, like, do you feel like you have to approach portrait photography a little different when it comes to photographing hip hop artists, or at least certain hip hop artists?
You know, it's interesting because since I've been shooting, I think that my first job was right out of college, which is the year 2000, and I think that hip hop itself has changed in that time. I think that hip hop photography now it's acceptable to be a lot more sort of daring. I remember when I was doing it I remember when it was a majority of what I was doing, I remember there just being a lot of conversations about like, is this real? Like, what's real? Like these photographs, are they going to make us look soft kind of thing? Like there were a lot more of those conversations. And I think that, as hip hop has matured as a sort of a media thing, I think that the artists became more just daring and experimental, you know, and it became sort of accepted to be. I mean, you know, the first few Kanye albums, he was a teddy bear. You know, which was like, do you know what I mean? And that was like crazy back then. But like now it's like, you know, like now it wouldn't be considered. Do you remember that? You know, like,
of course.
And you know, and we could talk about Kanye. You know, I remember shooting him. He was one of the first artists that I shot, and he was a little out of the box. But now I think that sort of thing wouldn't be that out of the box. You know, like people are like, yo, you know, so I do like watching how hip hop has evolved just visually, you know, over the decades that I've been shooting it. And when I started, it was definitely more about like, oh, well, that's, what are the streets going to think if we, if I wore a teddy bear backpack, or what are the streets going to think if I, you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. It was less accepting.
So speaking of Kanye, I'm gonna pull up some images right now. And I know you shared some images with me. And I tried to put them in as best of a chronological order as I could, thinking about like where you might have been in your career and how young the artists look, when you photograph them, right? So hopefully we can go through this chronologically. But it's interesting you mentioned Kanye, and you also mentioned how daring artists are nowadays, right? And I feel like Kanye may be one of the major reasons why things sort of shifted, because he came in. He wasn't the first, but he did a really good job of shifting it up when it came to the fashion, right? And when you look at Kanye's videos, he never did the same video twice. No video ever looked like a previous video. Whereas you got some artists who just keep repeating the same thing, right? They're in the club every time, they're hopping out of cars every time, right? It's like, bro, that should get boring, right? So, speak to us a little bit about this photo, man. Like how early was this in Kanye's career, and how early were you in your career when you got the call to do this?
So this shot was for The Source. This is the Source magazine, which is, I mean, Source XXL, like we're talking about, this shot is probably 2000 and I want to say 2001, 2002. I distinctly remember that when I started shooting for The Source, the first thing that I shot was this thing called Regional Stilo, which is the section in the very back of the book, which is where, like, the very back, like literally the last page. And myself and Tracy McGregor, I think was her name, we would go to different cities and see the regional fashion of those cities. Anyway, but this shot of Kanye was the first thing that I did that was not Regional Stilo. And Kanye everybody thought that his name was Kane. Like that's how much of a unknown quantity he was, so I was like, oh, I got this job to shoot Kane West. And I remember, and it was a big thing for me because this was the first, I remember Source had a thing called Unsigned Hype. It was all about new artists that are, you look out for the new artists. And Kanye was one of those. And so it was like a quarter page and a story. And it might have been my first quarter page. You know what I mean? Like, as far as like one of an artist. So it was a big kind of statement for me at the time. And we found a place in Harlem. It was I think it was a bakery shop or maybe like a little restaurant. And I'm not sure maybe I just rode around Harlem on my bike, like looking for spots to shoot. I told him that we had, $250, $300 for a couple hours to shoot. I'm shooting some artist called Kane West. It's going to be great. And, and it was cool. Like I remember Kanye this day, he had just gotten back from what I interpreted to be one of his first overseas trips to Japan. And he had a pair of shoes that it was absolutely imperative for me to include in the shot. Like he was very aware of like how, how his fashion was interpreted by like even that early on. And I actually do have a shot, like, we did shoot the shot with his shoes, but this was my personal favorite shot. Shot it with 4x5. So you can see a little bit of fall off, like with the tilt shift of the 4x5 back, obviously film. And, myself as a photographer, I've shot a ton of sort of the Unsigned Hype, and XXL had like a section like that too, of like just new acts. And so like Kanye was definitely very particular, but like nothing really, really stood out to me about him as far as, you can tell this guy's going to be a star. Like this is a star personality. He was definitely like super into fashion. he wasn't saying anything anti-Semitic at the time. So this is before he was like Kanye. Like, I think that Kanye today is like Kanye, like 3.0. This was Kanye, like this was base Kanye, He wasn't the nicest person, definitely into fashion. But I just never knew that he was going to be what he became to be.
And now you have one for the archives.
Yeah.
It's pretty dope. So, talk to us a little bit about, you get the call, you're, unsigned hype. How do you prepare to photograph for an artist where you don't really know their music? You're not familiar with who they are. How do you like scout locations and prepare, to photograph somebody you're not really that familiar with?
Sure. I mean, so now 23 years in, that's a different shoot, actually. That's my second time I shot him. But 23 years in, like, I know the city better. I know the resources that, I know producers that might know a spot. If I have, $250, $300 from the magazine to give whoever. But back then, to the best of my memory, I think that, I was like, all right, let me ride my bike up to Harlem and see what the spots might be. I don't think that the magazine gave me much direction about what needs to happen because it was such a low priority, like it was like a quarter page. But I mean, to me, it was huge. Like back then,
of course,
it's a magazine. They're not like, okay, well, this is the spot we're going to shoot. We have a set designer. We have a this, we have a that. And I think that, I was just rolling around Harlem, like on my bike, looking for a cool spot, and I had $300 to give whoever was down to have me, kind of shut down their spot for a couple hours. And so it was really sort of hands on. I'm doing the scouting. I'm doing the negotiating with the location. You know what I mean? Like, and I mean, there's a part of me that really misses that, but there's a part of me that realizes I don't know if I'm strong enough to still do that, run around in that way, But yeah, that's how that particular shoot of Kanye came together. And I'm sure a lot of other shoots around that time was, oh, well, you know what? I was at this bar a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was cool. Like, let me go in there tomorrow night for the shoot that I have on Friday, and just and try and negotiate in that way.
So it's almost like you have to, when you're that type of photographer, it's almost like you have to keep a mental Rolodex of cool, interesting places that one day, possibly, maybe in the future, you might be able to use this location for
100%. And then the other thing is, I didn't address this question as far as like, how would I approach photographing someone that, I just didn't have that sort of research on. You know what? So the way that I do it now is different than how I did it back then. Like back then, I really prided myself on knowing almost nothing about the person that I would be shooting and my logic was that I wanted it to be like a real sort of conversation. And like, I didn't want to come in with any preconceived notions. And so, and I've been lucky with that sort of philosophy, but as I, just got older and as the stakes got higher, I definitely realized how important it is to sort of, to have some sort of research on your subject, like some sort of like, oh, okay, you know what? I can't say this because this person is sensitive to this topic or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I can't say, oh, how's your mother doing if their mother died a couple of years ago? And do you know what I mean? Like, so back in those days, I think it was definitely a little bit more like a cowboy sort of approach. Like, I'm just going to, I'm going to show up. If I don't know who you are, like, we're going to get to meet each other on set, and somehow my charm will hopefully win you over. But I don't ascribe to that now. I definitely think that, I definitely try and do my homework at least a little on whoever I'm shooting if I'm not familiar with them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I sort of subscribe to that a bit myself when it comes to interviewing certain people, and I like discovering things during the conversation as opposed to walking in there and feeling like I know everything about you, so I'm going to ask you questions that only pertain to my interests. You know what I mean? I still want to be curious when I'm asking questions.
100%. 100%. I feel like, I mean, just to build on what you said, like my research now is not, it's not in depth, like exhaustively in depth. You know what I mean? But it's like, you know what? Like, let me know if there's something that I'm not supposed to do or say. Like, let me know a little bit about their history. But then also, like, once you're on set, leave that space for that discovery and that sort of like inspiration. Oh shit. Like, I didn't know that about you or whatever, like I think that's part of it, like you can't have everything scripted out.
Absolutely. Needs to be room for discovery. Yeah. So this photo, one of your earlier photos, right? Getting into like the hip hop industry, one of Kanye's early photos. You had a $250, $300 budget, right? And this location it just seems fitting for, like, you made the location work. I'm sitting there like, I don't know where this dude is at. I don't know what he's doing there, why he has on a freaking sports coat. I have no idea what's happening, right? But it's very interesting, right? And then we go to this photo. Fast forward. Kanye got a little bit of money. Got a little bit more color. Right? Got a little bit more color, a little bit more pop, a little bit more, finesse. Yeah. The glasses, you know what I mean? Like, now you have lighting. Right. You have a white backdrop. It looks like you got a little bit more money for this one. I don't know, but it looks like that, right? So what was the difference photographing this Kanye versus the first Kanye?
Well, this is for an ad for LRG. So he's wearing he's wearing an LRG shirt.
Yep.
And we shot this in a studio, and there were a couple other celebrities that we shot for this. This was, I want to say, 2006. Kanye is at least 2 albums deep. I want to say, or maybe the second one's about to come. Like, but Kanye, like people know who he is. But he's not Kanye who he is now.
He was a force, but after that first album, he was a force after that first album. So that's already 2 years, at least 2 years is that first album is out while the second one is about to drop. So he's already like on his way.
Yeah, and so Kanye, the interesting thing about this is Kanye, so LRG, the clothing line, the streetwear line, was one of my very first client, like I want to say advertising, but like I put it in quotations because because we were all kids, like the LRG, like they were all my brothers, you know what I mean? Like they didn't really know what they were doing. I didn't really know what they were doing. Me and LRG kind of grew together. And the interesting thing is, I think that Kanye sort of was growing at a similar time as we were, right? Mm-hmm. So Kanye was in early LRG campaigns that I did not shoot, but it's like, so Kanye had been an LRG personality for a few years. And I think that this might have been one of the last. I think that after this, Kanye might have gotten too big for LRG, or like Kanye was. Yeah. But that whole construct where it was like me, the LRG, like my brothers at LRG, and Kanye were sort of progressing at a similar rate, in our respective careers, and it wasn't like a totally different Kanye from the first time that I shot him. Because the first time he wasn't really like the friendly, he's kind of a dick. He's kind of a dick. He's kind of a dick. But you could tell, like, he was signed. He did have money. Like he did have a more defined direction of what he wanted to see of himself in photographs, and unlike the first time that I shot him, I do distinctly remember this time it's like, okay, this dude is going to, like, I heard the first album, like this guy has something special. You know what I mean? So
So did you see a difference in how he walked around during this shoot versus the first one?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, he the first one, it was me, my assistant, and I think his boy. Like, I think it was four of us. You know what I mean? And on this shoot,
oh, wow.
It was, you know, he had an entourage, like you can't see, but he had like some chains. Like, I think he was already on Rockefeller at that point, or at least he was producing for Jay and all those acts. So he had a chain. And he was rolling with, you know, like with a bunch of people, you know, like his whole, like, you know, entourage. He had people holding his things. So, you know, there was like more of an aura about him when he walked in the door. You know, it wasn't just him and some dude. So, yeah.
What did he remember you from the first photo shoot?
I don't think so, to be honest. I remember, like, he had a relationship with the owner of LRG, this guy Jonas, rest in peace, and the whole thing, like, it was their thing. You know what I mean? Like, I must have told him, like, oh, I shot you for the source, but I don't think I made too big of a deal about it, and I don't think I was too offended that he, you know, it wasn't a big deal for him that he didn't remember me. You know, so.
Cool, man. Well, you know, this is one of the arguably one of the most polarizing musicians in our lifetime. But it's dope that you got to work with him at the early stages, and you know, this is your contribution to hip hop. You know what I mean? So, yo, much respect to you for that. I'm gonna move on to you. Got it. So now, moving on. Fam, you got the babies, bro.
Yeah, man.
These dudes barely got facial hair, man. Like, talk about this, man. ASAP and Kendrick.
No, this was cool. I shot it for this magazine called Respect. I could be wrong, but the story behind this is probably 2012. And as somebody who, my hip hop influences, and when I fell in love with hip hop was, I want to say 92, 93. So in 2012, I was a little bit removed from just like the acts that were coming up. You know, I really think it happens with age, you know?
That's me now. Now.
Yeah. I mean, we can have a whole conversation. Like, basically any hip hop I hear these days, like, it all sounds the same to me. And maybe that's an old man thing to say, but like, it just doesn't hit the way that, you know, hip hop from my youth did, you know? So I remember I was rolling up, we shot at this store on the Lower East Side, and for some reason, ASAP and the whole ASAP crew, they would hang out in the basement of this store. And I was like, cool, like, I'll, you know, meet you guys there or whatever. Like, I told the magazine I'd meet them there. And it was a couple of blocks from my house. And I had an intern at the time that was of this generation, right? I mean, he was like significantly younger than I was. So like, we rolled up and I'm photographing ASAP Rocky, who is this dude could run for president. Like, as far as how charismatic this guy is, like, just, and how he speaks to his crew, like, he's definitely like a born leader of people. You know, at least that's the impression that I got. Like, no wonder, like, he's with Rihanna, the most beautiful woman in the world other than my girlfriend, you know? No, like,
you saved yourself. You just saved yourself.
That's right. Look, man, like, it's not my first rodeo, but no. So I'm there with ASAP and his crew, and they're drinking 40s, and like, we're kind of just hanging out. And it was a very sort of reportage thing. And my intern, who obviously is of a different generation, younger generation, he's like, yo, you should photograph Kendrick Lamar with ASAP. Like, you know, Kendrick just showed up because a bunch of people just walked into the basement. And I was like, yeah, no, that's a really good idea. Could you tell me which one Kendrick is? You know what I mean? You know, so it was like I was already sort of making my, I don't want to say exit, but like the hip hop that like had my heart was already sort of in the past in 2012. And so, but it was cool. Like my intern who was up on, you know, Who Was Who pointed Kendrick out, and I approached him. And you know, it was one of those things. We were in a basement, dog. Like, so it was kind of, and it was just reportage. And there's this shot of like, you know, and a couple other shots of just like real moments of them kind of, I kind of threw them against the wall and them kind of like hanging out. And only, you know, I don't want to say recently, but, you know, I'm just real appreciative that I got this moment with these two that were destined to become, you know, legends in the game. So, but, you know, but that says something also about me. Like I didn't know what Kendrick Lamar looked like. You know?
And you know, it's funny is sometimes if you know too much, this moment may not have happened if you
that's right
were more aware of who each of these
it's
two
so
were,
true
right?
It's so true. Like I was not like, you know, there was no sense of like being like, it was just a job, like, but there's no like I'm starstruck right now, you know. But yeah, man, that's the story behind that one.
Because being starstruck sometimes doesn't allow you to see that person as a person.
It's so true.
And I remember speaking with a celebrity photographer about their craft, right, and how they approach working with celebrities, and they were like, "Yo, they just want to feel like humans," because the rest of the world, when they're outside of that photo shoot, everybody is a fan,
right?
And the last thing they want is to be like in a photo shoot and photographer who's supposed to be taking the pictures like, can I get your autograph?
Right.
It's like,
even if you don't say it in those words, like, but you treat them as if they are, you know. Yeah, indeed. So that's interesting, man. And I think what's also interesting about this photo is, you know, after a certain point, Kendrick Lamar went for the throne and was like, I'm coming after everybody, right? And obviously, like, these two are friends here. And they were even on a few tracks together in the earlier, you know, early 2010s or whatever, right? But after he went for everybody's throat, these are rare sightings of him hanging out with other rappers. Oh, is there beef? Right? Is there beef between them now?
I'm not saying that there's beef, and nobody out there don't take I'm not saying there's beef. I'm just saying that there's sort of, it seems like there's just been this separation where like Kendrick Lamar is his own island. ASAP is his own island. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like these two they have like reached certain levels where they don't even like need to do music anymore. Or they don't need to do the whole scene thing where like they're posing for pictures and they're in the clubs, and they don't need to do that anymore. You know, so seeing a photo of these two together when they were young and coming up is really dope. And it's just like, I think it's important to see like the origins of how, you know, these artists grow and evolve.
No, it was interesting. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, like we were in the basement of a store. Like it was like, I'll show you the other pictures. Like, I don't know if you can do anything with them, but like, there's shit all around. This is not a penthouse or anything like this. This is just where like Rocky used to hang out, you know, for whatever reason. So like, and it wasn't a nice basement, like, and people were just drinking 40s and stuff like, and so it was, I mean, it was a scene that I was familiar with, like, for my own life, you know what I mean? Like, okay, cool. Like, we're just going to drink 40s and like roll up some blunts. So, no, it was very cool. I definitely did not know who Kendrick was. I'm happy that my intern like pointed him out, but no, it was a real moment. And hopefully that came across in the photographs.
Yeah, it's definitely a real moment, man, and it's pure. You know, it's pure.
J. Cole,
man, you got all these cats early, man. Like, I mean, it's also like you can tell how early it is based on the haircut.
Right. I mean? Yeah. No, I just saw something about you know that he rides around New York City on a city bike. Yeah, just. Yeah, but with his dreads.
It's a city bike?
Actually, you know what? It might not be a city bike. But you know what? On a bike.
It just
yeah,
might
it just
you
might
never
be.
know. That's how he goes.
No, this is I want to say this is around 2012 also.
Okay.
I remember
this is film? This is on film?
This is digital. I remember that there were a bunch of my friends who were really big fans of Cole, and and I had heard some tracks, and I thought that he was super smart, but I wasn't that familiar. But what I was familiar with was he did, maybe it was a mixtape or maybe it was on one of his albums, but he rhymed over the instrumental for 93 Till Infinity by Souls of Mischief. And which was the album that really got me into hip hop. Like, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Like, it's still like one of my favorite albums of all time, 93 Till Infinity. So I shot Jay I shot Cole up at the studio. There was a piano. I shot a bunch of pictures of him playing the piano. This is him sort of out in the fire escape area. But one of the things that made the shoot stand out for me was I approached him about that. I was like, "Oh, you're a Souls of Mischief fan, like because of that track, 93 Till Infinity." And he was like, "No, like what are you talking about?" I was like, well, the track, like the instrumental is from 93 Till Infinity. It's like, "Oh, I've never heard of it." And I was like, "Whoa." Like, to me, that was, I mean, I didn't really exactly know how to feel about it, because I was kind of like, I thought there was this thing that we would have love for this classic album, but he was unaware of where the track had come from that he was rhyming over, and which is not to say, which is not to say anything about Cole or anything, but it was just a surprise to me, because he seemed to be a student of hip hop, and I thought that he might know that.
I mean, what's interesting about that is I remember when Bad Boy was really starting to blow up in the mid 90s, and I'm playing all these Bad Boy records, and it's James Brown samples, is what's homie Barry White samples. There's all types of like old Earth, Wind and Fire, and so I'll play a song. And then my mother is like, "Oh, what you doing listening to that?" Right. And then all of a sudden, like, Biggie comes in, Biggie. And then she's like, "Oh, man, hip hop is always ruining songs." Right. And I'm like, "Ma, but it's not ruining it. It's like, now that you tell me about where the origin comes from, like, now when I hear the original, I can appreciate the original." Right. And now as an adult, I have love for the sampled version and the hip hop version, right? And so I think that's a testament to hip hop, where this dude, he's rhyming. He has an ear, right? He has an ear for quality. That's one of the probably dopest tracks in hip hop. You hear it, it's a classic, right? And he even dropped a verse to that same beat recently.
Really?
And he goes in on it, destroys it, right? But I think it's also probably dope that you had that conversation with him, because I hope that after that he will go and listen to the original, and that interaction that you had, even though you may have expected it to be a little bit more like of a connection, like, we both have a love affinity for this track. He walked away from that like, let me listen to this joint, and that small interaction kind of like added something to his hip hop.
I hope so. What's interesting? You made such a good point, man. Like, this even happens to me to this day, where I'll hear the original sampled song, like, "Oh, that's interesting." Like, you know what I mean? Like, to some song that I probably haven't heard in 15, 20 years, like, and I think it's about to come on, but it's the original. And it's like, there's something in there about, we're talking about the 50-year hip hop anniversary. Like, there's something about that knowledge sort of spanning decades, where you could be like, "Oh, you know what? Whoever sampled the song, like, they heard this one part." And I don't know. I think it's super cool. Like, that happens to me to this day, where, like, I've just never heard the sample, and then I'll hear it, and it's like, oh God, it breathes new life.
And you'll hear that 1.5 second break in the beat, and you're just like, hold on, and you rewind it, and like, oh, that's what, like, I sit there and I'm thinking like, yo, how high would he
right
to like pick out that one little part? You know
That's
so
crazy. Like it puts you in their heads, like that little bit, like you made into a song. Like, okay, like, and 99% of the time, I'm like, I respect the producer that much more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So around 2011, 2012, Cole, I'm not sure where's Cole in his journey. He's still finding his way.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I know. I remember when I shot him, there were people who knew him, and not like hardcore, you know, the hardcore listening public. Like I'm sure he was a public figure. Yeah, but I'm not sure exactly. You know, he's not J. Cole of today.
So, yeah. So then, what was the vibe like for this photo shoot? Like, how was it meeting him and you know preparing to make this image?
He was cool. So we shot it in the recording studio. I have a bunch of, you know, he rolled up and started to play the piano, which was actually super impressive to me. Like I respect anybody who could do that because that shit is hard. I can't do it, but
so he's like a skilled or trained piano player.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded great to me, and so I was like, "Yo, do you mind if I?" And that wasn't for a picture. He just rolled up, started playing the piano. I was like, "Do you mind if I photograph this?" And so I could send you some of those. But to me, like this shot was the most intimate. He's just a chill dude, you know, like he's playing the piano, did basically whatever I wanted him to do. Like it was at that point where I was trying not to, I don't know if you've been on, if you've had this in your shoots, but like when somebody's real cool and then you're like, you know what, let me get out of your way. Like you're not like, like the shoot could have gone on and on, you know, but I was like, you know what, we're in a recording studio. You've been really gracious. I'm gonna get out of your way, you know. Like I know that you're here to work, but like, but he was just down to hang out, you know. So yeah, no, it's just real cool. It's my one and only time shooting him. I've definitely followed his career since, but yeah, I'll just always remember the one thing about 93 Till Infinity, and I'll remember just like he's just a cool and real dude, you know. Couldn't ask for anything more. Very giving.
That's dope. That's dope. And I'm looking at this, and it's just like it's a great portrait. You know, love the shadows going in from like shadow into the light. I mean, you know, light always helps to tell a story about a person, and you know, I think you captured this pretty well.
Thanks, man.
Using that one window, using a frame within the frame.
Can I tell you something? So when I shot this, I hated this. I hated this photo because I was at a point in my career where I don't know. It's just really, you know, what can I do with lights? You know what I mean? Like what kind of effect? Like get a glare, da da da. And I think that this was maybe he was smoking in this. I forget, he was smoking out of the window, and it was for me at the time. It was kind of a throwaway thing because it's like window light, and there weren't any like sort of lighting, didn't show my lighting acumen, but like now I really like it, you know, because it's not produced, because it's not produced at all. It's me with a camera and a subject, no lights, no frills, you know. And I just think my own personal photography journey has I just didn't appreciate. I was too like young as a photographer when I shot this to appreciate this shot, you know. As
a portrait photographer, right? I think there's moments when we need to understand what's the appropriate lighting for each person that's being photographed, right? So the lighting sort of needs to match the personality of the sitter, and also needs to tell a story that who the client wants to tell, whether it's a campaign, whether it's selling a product like LRG or whatever, right? So lighting plays a very important role in the personality of the photo. So how do you, so going from this image of J. Cole in like the vestibule or in the fire escape, whatever, hardly any production, to this shot of Rick Ross, which looks a lot more stylized, and you brought in your lights. Like, how do you know when your choice felt appropriate for the person that you were photographing?
Sure. I mean, like you said, there are different variables, right? So it's like, if you're shooting for Reebok or something, the shoes are probably going to have to play a prominent role and be lit so people can see the product, right?
Yep.
You know, there are sometimes when light is something that, there's a saying, I think that Kwaku said it, and I'm going to butcher it, but it basically says you can kind of hide stuff behind the lighting, which is to say, you know, maybe the subject's not the most interesting, but if you have interesting lighting, then it can help the photograph out. You know, so there's that, right? Like sometimes, you know, I fall prey to, you know, hide behind some good lighting, if nothing else is going on. But then sometimes it's like, so with this particular shot of Rick Ross, I definitely wanted I was in love with like flaring, like, you know, can I kind of like put my lights in the camera, like, and so no, go on, sorry. No, so when I walked into the shoot, I was like, I want to get some really interesting flair. Like, I don't know what Rick Ross is going to give me, but like, I want to get some interesting flair, and we'll see what happens, right? And so the story behind this one is, and this is probably 20. I mean, Rick Ross was at his, he was huge at this point.
This is 2020.
This is 20. I want to say 14.
Oh, 2014. Okay.
But so he came in with his entourage. And basically at this particular studio, there was a gigantic, probably like, you know, 3.5 foot, you know, maybe 3 foot porcelain orange elephant, and like elephant head, like it was the head of it. And so I approached Rick Ross, and I was like, look, like, I think that we could do something really fun. Like, you are obviously like the elephant in the room. Like, you're the biggest thing in the industry right now. I would love to photograph you with this porcelain orange head elephant. And so he looked at me. He's like, you're kidding, right? He's like, I'm not doing that. I was like, cool. I was like, got it. And the way that he said it, like, I was like, okay, like, I'm not going to win this. Like, it's just not going to happen. So, and from that point on in the shoot, like, it was kind of like me and Rick Ross we weren't really seeing eye to eye. Right. And so Rick had brought in, at this point, I didn't know who DJ Khaled was, but he brought in, I guess he did a song with DJ Khaled. And Rick Ross and he also brought in his own film crew, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're like, hey, like, we got this studio, we could shoot a music video here. And so I'm like, yeah, we could totally do that, right? And so I was like, well, why don't we film your video over here, right where my lights are? And so basically, this is Rick Ross filming like, a lot of shots have DJ Khaled in the background, but this is one with just Rick. And the energy that he was not giving me before, he started to give for his music video. He's shooting the music video. And so, like, I'm like, this is great. And so me and his videographer are kind of trading back and forth, like, Rick's music was blaring, he's doing the video, and I'm getting this energy. And it just so happened that my flares, like, are working now. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, Rick is like, he's in motion, like and so it was one of those situations where it's like, you know, me and Rick, we weren't friends at the end of the shoot, but I wasn't trying to be his friend. Like, it was one of those things where it's like, we got pictures that I really love with a lot of energy. He came in, decided he wanted to shoot a music video. What am I going to do? I'm going to say no to that. And it got, you know, everybody got what they wanted out of it. I didn't get the big porcelain elephant, but you know what? Like this shot, you know, like, I love the shots that I got, like the energy and the way that the light ended up adding to it, you know? Yeah. So it was one of those things I didn't anticipate it happening, but it really did work out, in my opinion.
That's dope, man. And I'm glad you shared the fact that you came to him with an idea that was basically shut down
instantly.
And you kind of knew at that point instantly, and you knew from that point, like this is going to be a tough one, right? Because then it's like your first idea gets shut down, then this dude is probably questioning anything that you come up with at this point.
That was the vibe.
So it's like, how do you bounce back?
That was the vibe, I get it. And it was kind of like, fuck, you know, like, how do I bounce back? Like, well, I've got to get some pictures out of this. And then he wanted to film a video, and I was like, cool, like let's do it. Maybe there are pictures there.
You know, hip hop can be a pretty unforgiving industry. Sure. You say one wrong thing, you wear one wrong thing or whatever, right? Like, and then that could be like your whole career. You could be like blacklisted or just ridiculed, made fun of, ostracized, whatever, right? And it unfortunately could be an industry where like you could be judged based on the one thing that you do, and that defines your whole career after that point, right? So it's dope that you shared that story and how you were able to bounce back and still create an image that was energetic, and it feels like that feels like Rick Ross. You know what I mean? Who was this image for?
I think that this is for a small magazine called Status, possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So well done, man. And you know, I think for all the portrait photographers out there, man, I think learning how to break the ice and get comfortable with the people we're photographing is sometimes the hardest part. The technical part about working the camera, that, you know, that is easier.
Right.
You know, it's easy to kind of like, you can sit at home and watch a bunch of YouTube videos and read the manual and learn all the technical stuff about a camera. But the camera is just a tool. And if you don't know how to make the person you're photographing comfortable, that camera is not going to do very much for you, right? So definitely thank you for sharing how you were able to bounce back and still make an image that had this energy. I think what's really, I think as we evolve and become better storytellers with the camera is, how do we walk into a situation, sort of feel the vibe of the person we're photographing, the energy that they're giving off, and how do we still produce an image like this, but with intention, you know, with like just skill of how to get this energy out of a person. You know what I mean? Because there are people who I don't know how they do it, but they're able to like get all types of expressions and emotions, and I sit there and I'm like, wow, that's some magic power, right? And I think this next image, you know, this Travis Scott.
That's Travis Scott. Yep.
Right. For Reebok.
For Reebok. Yeah.
Yo. So perfect example, right? We went from this image of Rick Ross dancing, spinning his lyrics, you know, got that energy. The lights are working. And how do you get this dude to jump and do this pose? Like, I've worked with folks where I was like, I have this idea, I want you to jump or do something, and they're like, for real? And I'm like, yeah, trust me. Like, and they give me like some half-ass shit, right? And I'm like, come on, man. But here it looks like homie is fully committed. So talk to us about this shoot and how this came about.
So this is for Reebok. I want to say this was 2015-ish, maybe 2016 in LA. I could be wrong about those dates. I remember Travis Scott. The idea behind the campaign was like all these sort of like the next rappers or the next musicians. Mm-hmm. And Travis is one of them. Like Travis was Kanye's protege, I think, at that point. And I think that was the extent of it. Okay. Like, you know, like people kind of knew who he was, but he obviously wasn't who he was now. To answer your question, the shoot was, there was a double concept shoot. Like the first concept was him at a performance. Like we had a venue, we had a bunch of extras, and it was him performing to the crowd. And the way that he was shot, which is not this shot, his foot was on like excuse me, his foot was on a speaker where it was featured prominently, the Reebok, and the crowd was sort of below, you know, and you could see him sort of leaning over the crowd. But then the second concept was just him on white, you know, and to answer your question about how I didn't have to convince him to do this at all. Like, Travis Scott is probably one of the most amazing performers, at least on set, that I've ever photographed. Like, he was just down. Like, his energy was crazy. So it's like, you know how I told you, like, the first time that I photographed Kanye, I didn't really feel anything really special. Like this, like when I photographed, I was like, this guy's a star. Like this guy is a star. You know what I'm saying? He was down for whatever. Like his energy was endless. Like there was like 10-hour shoot, whatever. He was still. And so I think that by the time that we got to this shot, I don't remember whose suggestion it was, mine or his, but it was an easy suggestion. Like the guy he was down to do anything, you know. And in that way, I just sort of respect him as an artist. Like he was just down, like, okay, cool, let's try that, let's create. And I've heard stories about him, like around this time, maybe hopefully still this way, I hope so. But where, you know, people be like, look, like there's this spot, you know, 2 hours from the studio, it's in the mountains, like it's really dope. And Travis will be like, yo, let's go there. Like that's 2 hours, you know? So, you know, like I was definitely blessed on this one to have like a participant that, you know, like I could have given him the orange porcelain elephant to hold and he would have been down where Rick Ross wasn't. So, you know, he was just down to create, you know? And he would definitely talk your ear off about how many instruments he plays. And he also directs, and he also, like, that was a little much, you know, like he was definitely at a high image of himself. But as far as like, you know, doing a shot of him jumping in midair, like that was easy. That was easy to convince him of that.
You know, what's dope about, you working with some of these artists at the early stages of their careers is that you probably had a lot more time to work with them, than now. Like if you were to get a call to photograph Travis Scott or Rick Ross now, I don't know, you might have 15 minutes.
Right.
You know what I mean? And for him to be willing to just go off into the mountains and do all that's great.
Right. Travis is probably not going to do that now, but yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I did, like you say, photograph him then. But I just respected his creativity. I respect him as an artist. Like, you know, like I'm not, like I said, like modern hip hop is sort of bewildering to me a little bit, but like, you know, I liked Astro World. Like I liked the new album. So,
bewildering is a funny term to use in hip hop, and I understand it completely. I'm definitely on the old man vibes. You know, I try to keep my ear to the streets a little bit, but you know, I think we're at the age where we're seeing hip hop grow, so we can actually talk about it from an older perspective, as opposed to like when we were coming up, we were growing up with it, so there wasn't much old music to talk about. It was just like it was our music, and now it was ours. And now it's not feeling like that so much because it has grown so large and there's so many different subgenres of the culture, right? Which is amazing. But also that means that there's so much stuff that that's just not for us, and I think that's okay.
Right. Yeah. No. I think it's definitely okay. I think that if hip hop had not evolved, then this 50th anniversary would be a lot different. You know what I mean? It would still be relevant, but you know, like I think that just as artists, genres, music, art has to evolve, you know? But it was interesting what you said. Like, yeah, I mean, all these little subgenres or whatever, but at the same time, it's funny because like we were talking about 93 till infinity, like, okay, so this is 2023. So there is the 30-year 93 till infinity anniversary that it was actually in New York in August. I did not go. I really wanted to, but I was trying to imagine what that concert must have been like. Yeah. Like it must have been like just all old people like us. You know what I mean? Like, and I imagine it must have been like an early ass concert. Like, you know, it's probably go on at 5, like, and probably be up by like 9, you know?
Get a good night's sleep.
You know what I mean? Like, come on. But that's hip hop too. Like, there's nothing about that makes it less hip hop. It's kind of like, that's our genre of hip hop, you know, like that's, so yeah.
Yeah. So doing Black Shutter and being able to speak to like so many different photographers from so many different genres of photography, you know, it's interesting when I discover somebody's work, or not even, I get to discover a lot of work, but then I also see work that I was already familiar with, but just never knew who created it. And I remember when I first asked you to be on the podcast a few years ago, the audio podcast, and I remember like just going through your work and seeing this image, and I was like, holy shit, you did this? This was like one of my favorite, images, especially of Nas, right? But also because of the reference. You know, you're welcome. So for those who don't know, like this is like a direct reference to a scene in Do the Right Thing. Direct reference, to this scene. And when I saw that image, I was like, yo, what a dope tribute to such a dope classic movie, man. So I would love for you to just like speak a little bit about this image and how the concept for this came about, because who thinks about referencing that specific image? That was such a dope tribute, man.
So it was obviously shot for the cover of Complex. I want to say, and I hope I don't get this wrong, but excuse me, I want to say it was Sasha Jenkins' concept as far as to reference that. And I remember, like, for me at the time, Do the Right Thing was sort of, much, much earlier. I had to rewatch it to be like, okay, cool. Like that's what we want to do. And then we start this is a set build. We built this set. We took over 2 studios. Yeah. We took over 2 studios in Pier 59. And this whole thing is a set build. Like all the dirt on the floor, like everything. And, thanks, man. Like, I feel like this one, I did not know that so what you said about people knowing this photo, a lot of people know this photo much more than like a lot of my other work. And I just didn't know that it was going to be sort of that big, and I'm very appreciative. But yeah, man, like it's, the concept, the set build, how it came together, the color grading, that started out on Complex's side. And then it's like, and then I remember, I forget what album he was coming out with when this happened.
Life is Good. It looks like Life is Good.
Yeah. Why? Yes. Yeah. Of course, it's on the fucking cover. But it was also sort of, it was also an appreciation and celebration of Nasir and his career. So, like, obviously, if you look in the crates, there's the Illmatic cover, God's Son, and so there were there's like a lot of references in this one picture, and hopefully people could see that. But I mean, the shoot itself. I mean, if you know anything about Nas, this is the first and last time I shot him. Like, this is the first time I shot him. I mean, hopefully we get to shoot again. But he's like, he is that reserved kind of quiet guy in person, and I think that, if you go into the shoot and that you're not going to get like some crazy Travis Scott energy, then this is perfect. Like, he's just kind of, it looks like he's on the sidewalk chilling, you know what I mean? So,
like, he doesn't have to perform much for this. He basically said, like, yo, act like you chilling on the block like you normally do.
Right, exactly. And everything really came together, man. Like, that it gave me a real it gave me a real sense of my place in just being on set, my place in history. Cause my first album that I ever bought with my own money was Illmatic. I bought it the same day that I bought, Enter the 36 Chambers. Mm-hmm. So, and I remember, yeah. So these are my first hip hop albums that I've, so for me, that was very special. Just like, wow, like literally, like they were the first hip hop album I ever bought, the first album I ever bought with my own money, period. Mm-hmm. And so like just being in that place, I was very aware like that teenage me would definitely, his mind would be blown. But then like also the celebration of Nas with these references to a movie like Do the Right Thing, which was monumental in its own right. It was just cool, it was cool.
I think it's dope that, I didn't know this was a set build. So that means that's a testament to the set designer, right? But I think talk a little bit about what it's like to work with on a set, where you have like an art director, you have a publication complex, and then they obviously wanted to put some funding behind this, right? So they got a set designer to replicate this scene from Do the Right Thing. How does a photo shoot like this with Nas and all of these extra people on the set differ from the first time you photograph Kanye in the back of a bakery?
Sure. Right. I mean, obviously, very obviously, it's a bigger production, and obviously, like when I went into that Kanye shoot, I didn't really know what was going to happen, but here there were sketches, like everything was like this is what is being referenced. This is sort of, we probably had not a pose, but we knew sort of where the chair was, and like at least in the reference, like in the movie, and then it's like, okay, cool, like we can play off that. So this is definitely much more, I want to say, it's probably the wrong word, but choreographed, thought out. There are a lot more phone calls that are happening. Okay, cool. This is what's going to be possible for the set. This is what's not going to be possible. These are the props that we have. So it's a bunch of people sort of working in concert. I think it really helps. I remember on the shoot, the feeling was like, I think that everybody on set knew that we were creating something that was like a celebration of Nas, like, and by extension, a celebration of like just hip hop, and also an appreciation of by association, Spike Lee and Do the Right Thing. So I think that everybody on set was very aware that we were excited to do a good job, and very aware that we had to do a good job, kind of thing. Like it was very like there's too much going on. Let's fucking get this right, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And no sort of for instance, there was, I think that this is just one light. This is not like, no, we're not going to do any lighting tricks. Like I want the light to look like the sun. Why? Because like we're referencing this very particular movie.
It feels hot. It feels hot.
Exactly. Like, exactly. So, and so, like I'm definitely, I love sort of like, improvisation and like inspiration in the moment, but like this concept was very particular, and I like that too, because it's more like painting a little bit rather than it's like painting something realistic rather than like who's the guy who like splatter paints everywhere? You know what I'm talking about?
Pollock, Jackson Pollock.
Yeah, Jackson Pollock. Like this is definitely more. It's a different process, And I love the fact
you're not experimenting. You have a vision, a collective vision. Like you've been on phone calls between like Complex, the art directors, the set designers, you yourself, right? Maybe someone from Nas's camp, right? So everybody's on the same page when you get to set that day, and you have your shot list, and you have people keeping you on track for time and things like that, right? Did you have another setup for this, or everything was just this?
there was a second set where on a roll down, it was sort of his face in the Egyptian pharaoh, like the I Am album. So that was the second set, and I think there was a third set. It was 3 adjoint sets. I can send you the picture, but it was a big build, especially for a magazine, man.
Yeah,
like they put some money into that budget. But
it's a classic photo, man. I love this photo.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Thank you.
For sure. This photo is interesting to me because, I mean, it's Ice-T. He's a legend. But this is, to me, a testament to your skill as a portrait photographer, because Ice-T's been out of the hip-hop game for a while, but he's still Ice-T. And you know, and he still has like that vibe to him, like, you know, like you still don't fuck with him. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't even say I would quibble with you or say he's out of the game. Like, he still performs. He still does shows. Yeah, okay. He still does shows. Yeah.
Then my bad, right? But this photo, I believe you photographed this for Simon and Schuster.
That's right.
Right, which is a publishing company, a book publishing company. And I click on Simon & Schuster, doing a little bit of research, and they got like kids' books, and they got like, you know, it's like books with butterflies and flowers on them and stuff like that. And it's like, all right, so you get this call to photograph Ice-T, like who in the 80s was, you know, considered a gangster rapper.
Right.
Gangster rapper.
Gangster rapper. Yeah, that's right.
Right. But you're photographing him for a book publishing company.
Right.
And so how do you thread the needle between still keeping his image, right, of like this hip hop legend who came up in, like, you know, in LA during like crazy time, and the reputation he still has, right? But also keep it professional for whoever, for the client who probably doesn't want to promote like some gangster shit.
Right. I mean, like you said, his reputation as a gangster rapper, like when he was in that scene, that is, I think that more people probably know him from his role on TV, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, but the premise of the book that I photographed of it was a book that he wrote, or, you know, he dictated, whatever. And the book was called Split Decision. And I would imagine it's out, but it was about him and his boy, whose name I completely forget, but basically they were in the LA streets together back in the day. And it was as Ice-T was getting out of the game and getting more into music, and his boy just wanted to do one more job. Like one more, like robbery or something. And his boy the robbery went wrong. Somebody ended up getting shot, and his boy did a couple decades in jail. And so the premise of the book is Split Decision, like Ice-T, like, and how his boy's life had just gone in different directions. And the dude just got out of jail, and like they're still boys or whatever. But so the premise was, on one half of the book would be Ice-T as Ice-T, businessman, like, but still looks sort of like, you know, he still has that aura about him, you know, but like we want him to be in a suit, you know. But then on the other half was his boy, like a picture from back in the day when they were still in the streets. So the idea was, like, Ice-T needed to look like his shit was together, because his split decision, his half of that decision led him to this. And his boy made the wrong decision and led him to the other thing.
Was this a fiction book, or was like based on real events?
I would imagine. Yeah, I haven't read it, but like, yeah, like the way that was explained to me, this is all true. Like, his boy that had been put away in jail, like that was actually, you know, a real person who he's still in touch with. Like, yeah, so it's sort of a hey kids, or hey whoever reads the book, your life can be this or it could be that kind of thing.
Yeah. Dope.
Mm.
Dope. Yo, we're gonna wrap it up with Uncle Snoop.
Yeah.
Tell us about this. I mean, so far, bro, you photographed Kanye, J. Cole, Rocky, K. Dot, God, Nas, Ice-T, and Snoop, and this is, you know, we're gonna end it on this photo, but there's other photos of, like, you got Run DMC, you got joints in there, man. But
yeah, thank you.
Tell us, you're welcome, man. So, like, tell us how it was, like, photographing Unc.
So okay. So the first, I don't know if I don't want to say it's the first album I fell in love with, but I really loved Doggy Style. Fair. Like, I thought that Doggy Style was absolutely brilliant. Like, I mean, it was something that, I mean, it was completely different from anything I
Everything ever. About that album, bro.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, and to be honest, Snoop would still occupy the same space for me if he never made another album again. Like, he in my personal opinion, he never made another Doggy Style. Like, Doggy Style is it's perfect. Mm-hmm. So this was another situation where it was like a meeting, you know, somebody that was really transformative to me.
Yeah.
This was for Adidas. I want to say this is around 2015, something like that. Just the story of the shoot was, it was like a Christmas theme thing for some reason. I forget why. That's why he's holding a present. But, you know, it was everything I expected. Like, what do you expect when you shoot Snoop? Okay, cool. So first thing I expected is he's probably not going to be on time. He's not going to be late. He's not going to be on time, though. Okay, cool. Check. The second thing is you'll probably smell the weed before he walks in the room. That definitely happened. Like, I already smelled the weed before he walked in the building. Like, no lie. And so, like, I was like, this is great. Like, this is totally going just how I thought it would. And Snoop, but the other thing about somebody like Snoop, at this point, he'd been in the industry for, I mean, since what, like 92, 93. Mm-hmm. So, and he, that day on set, he kind of showed me what you needed to, like, okay, for instance, he came in, he was a little late. He wasn't hours late, he was a little late. And hip hop, like, that's just a given. You know what I mean? So yeah. Cool. But when he came in, he shook everybody's hand in the room. When he left, he said goodbye to every single person in that room. Like, there are people, like, and I heard that Method Man's like this too. Like, there are people who, like, that longevity, and they're just, you know, doing commercials, but they've just been in this forever. Like, it's those little things, man, where it's, but like, you know, wow.
And they also have careers outside of music, where you sort of, if you want, like you say, if you want to have that longevity, you have to, you know, be a little bit more professional, a little bit more courteous, right? Yeah. Because that's a lot of money on the table. Like, if you right. have like that if you don't present yourself in a way where you can fit in different rooms and different spaces and different right. circles, right? You can't just be like, all right, I'm gonna keep it hood for the streets. Like, you're right. gonna be very limited. You know, these dudes have been on sets, movie sets, TV shows, like,
with all kinds of people. And that was sort of something that stuck out to me, where it was kind of like, yeah, like, that makes sense. Like, in his industry, and his, you know, he does a couple different things, but I really think that it translates to just dealing with people, where it's like, yeah, just don't be like, if you're not like, it doesn't take any energy to not be a dick. Like, you know, I mean, sometimes it does, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know, it's like, treat people well, you know, like, be a cool person, you know, as much as possible. And, that was sort of a lesson to me. It's like, okay, cool. Like, that's why artists like Snoop, like, I mean, he doesn't put out albums like that, but like you said, like, he can cross genres, you know, like movies, whatever. And now he's just Snoop. He's just one of those people that's just like, he's just Snoop. You know what I mean? Like he's a celebrity in that genre, you know?
I mean, it's always fascinating when I meet people, celebrities or not, who what you see is what you get. Right. And what I mean by that is like, even for the people who are not celebrities, there's something like they think different, they act different, they talk different, they dress different, their opinions are like, you know, not necessarily the most popular opinion, but they stand by it in a way that doesn't feel like they're trying to be different.
Manufactured. That's true. That's
exactly
so true.
Right. And I feel like I really enjoy being around people like that because it feels like they are 100% themselves, regardless of if they're in a boardroom or if they're like kicking it with you at the bodega. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not to say like everybody else is fake or that, like, but I feel like a lot of times we go into situations and we might put on a different hat based on the situation because we feel like, all right, well, now I'm in the office, so I need to be a little bit more professional. Or I'm chilling with my boys, I need to be a little bit more this or whatever, right? And this dude, what's so amazing about Snoop is that even before weed was legal, everybody knew he was high. And he smoked. I'm sure he's smoking in every dressing room before every interview, smoking on stage. He has a show with Martha Stewart. I know him and Martha be blazing. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. But that for all these years that he's been in the game, like, everybody associates him with weed. And everybody knows he's gonna be high. Like, there's no getting around it. He's gonna be high wherever he's at.
Right, of course. It's good.
And people are just like, all right, well, it's not legal, but if I don't see it, then
right.
I think that's amazing. And as a testament to his spirit. This dude is a genuine spirit, man. So it's dope that you got to photograph him, man, and add that to your archives as well.
You know, I'll tell you one thing that happened on this shoot. It's super quick. He was rolling with a bunch of, just entourage, security, whatever. And I had stepped out of the room, I think, at some point, and then he got on set, and then I had come back on set. And his security stopped me. They're like, yo, you can't go in there. I'm like, well, I'm the photographer. And it was a whole thing. It was probably like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I had to get somebody to vouch for me that I was the photographer to get through his security, which, I mean, Snoop had no part in that. And I guess security was just doing their job. But it was definitely like, it was one of those,
Yeah.
I mean, it's more of a funny story and an annoyance at that point. And I'm not trying to read anything else into it. But it was definitely like, okay, cool. Like, let me get this person over here to vouch for me that I'm the photographer, so I get on my set. That was funny. But the shoot itself, Snoop did absolutely everything that was asked for. I mean, I don't want to say he was the most like, hey, let's try this, let's try that. You know what I mean? But like, he came there to work, and he was really great at doing his job that day, and he was amazing, very gracious.
Dope, man, dope. So, I just ran down some of the, amazing, talented artists that have helped to craft the culture of hip hop, man. Like, it's been dope to see and see your work and hear the stories behind some of these images and your experiences working with these artists. Like, do you ever stop and look back at your work like, holy shit, like, I've worked with some really, really talented people, like, I
really should more, because it's in venues like this, or like when I made that Instagram post. It's weird. Like, before I made the Instagram post that we're referencing right here, I was like, shit, like I haven't really shot a lot of hip hop, especially not recently. And then I started to go through the archives. I was like, oh, it's something about the way that, I don't know if your mind works this way too, but like, I just don't think about it that often. And then when it's like, when it's actually put in front of me, it's like, whoa, like I'm very thankful to have the archive that I do. And I mean, just being in some of these rooms with these people and be able to create, it's the great honor of my life, but it's definitely not something that I should probably think about more. I don't think about it every day, but when I see stuff together like this, it's kind of like, and I'm talking to you, telling like the stories. It's like, whoa, you ever like, maybe you can relate to this. It's like when I see my work on a billboard, it's almost like an out of body experience. Like I know that I did it, but like, it's almost like somebody else did it. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of how I see some of this work. Like I did do this, but like, I just don't think about it enough to like, for it to really, really be there every day, and maybe that's just me, but yeah, it's venues like this where I'm like, and I get to tell the stories. Like, I'm just appreciative. Like, okay, cool. Like maybe that gives me a little bit more confidence going into the next shoot, So,
yeah. I mean, dope photos, brother. Dope photos. As a lifetime, that. You're welcome, man. As a lifelong fan of hip hop, I'm going to die a fan of hip hop. I just appreciate your contributions to the culture. And definitely going to make sure folks know where to find you. But Kareem, thank you for sharing your time, sharing your stories, sharing your images, man. Really appreciate it, man. And on that note, that's a wrap, y'all.
Thank you very much for having me, man. Peace.
You got it, man. Peace.